Every financial advisor in America will tell you that you need at least $2 million to retire comfortably. Some say $3 million. The most conservative say $5 million. The retirement planning industry has built an entire business model around convincing you that freedom is impossibly expensive, that you'll need decades of saving and sacrifice, that retirement before 65 is a fantasy for all but the wealthiest. They're all wrong. Not slightly wrong, catastrophically wrong, because they're optimizing for the wrong variable. They're calculating how much money you need to maintain your current lifestyle in your current location with your current spending habits. I'm going to tell you something different. I'm going to tell you how much money you need to never have to work for someone else again, to wake up every morning and decide how to spend your time based on what matters to you rather than what pays you, to have enough passive income that employment becomes optional rather than mandatory. Those are completely different questions with completely different answers. And the answer to the second question, which is the only question that actually matters, is $300,000. Not 3 million, not 2 million, 300,000. Now, before you dismiss this as impossible or naive or disconnected from reality, let me show you the mathematics. Let me show you the geographic arbitrage calculations that the financial services industry doesn't want you to see. Because if you understood these numbers, you'd realize you could be free in 5 to 10 years instead of 30 or 40, and they'd lose decades of management fees and commissions. This isn't wishful thinking. This is arithmetic. That's been true for 100 years and will be true for the next 100. And it starts with understanding what retirement actually means. The retirement planning industry has convinced most people that retirement means maintaining their pre-retirement standard of living indefinitely. If you're spending $70,000 per year while working, you need enough money to spend $70,000 per year forever after you stop working. This seems logical until you examine the assumptions. First assumption, you'll want to spend the same amount. Wrong. Most retirement spending is compensation spending. Money spent to deal with the stress and time constraints of working. Expensive meals because you don't have time to cook. New clothes for work. Expensive vacations because you only have 2 weeks per year. A nice car because your commute is miserable and you deserve something comfortable. Entertainment and hobbies because you need to decompress from work stress. Remove the job and most of that spending becomes unnecessary. You have time to cook. You don't need work clothes. You can travel during off-peak times when everything costs less. You don't commute. You're not stressed and don't need expensive coping mechanisms. The actual cost of a good life without employment is 30 to 50% less than the cost of the same life with employment. Second assumption, you'll live in the same place. Why? If your job is what ties you to an expensive city, why stay there when the job ends? The difference in cost of living between San Francisco and Lisbon is 70%. Between New York and Chiang Mai is 85%. Between Seattle and Medi is 75%. You can have a better quality of life in dozens of places around the world for a fraction of what you're spending now. Better weather, better food, better culture, more time outdoors, closer to nature, stronger communities. The only reason not to consider these places is if you're anchored by employment or family. Remove those anchors and the entire world becomes available at prices that make retirement possible with far less capital. Third assumption, you need to replace your income. Wrong. Again, you need to cover your expenses. Those are different numbers. Most people confuse income with spending because during their working years, those numbers are related. Your income determines your spending capacity. But in retirement, income is irrelevant. Only expenses matter. If you can live well on $18,000 per year, you don't need income replacement. You need $18,000 per year. This is where the mathematics become interesting. $300,000 invested conservatively in dividend-paying stocks yielding 4% generates $12,000 per year in passive income without touching the principal. That's $1,000 per month. In the United States, $1,000 per month is poverty. In Portugal, it's a comfortable middle-class life. In Thailand, it's an upper middle-class life. In Colombia or Vietnam or Albania or dozens of other countries, it's enough to rent a nice apartment, eat well, have health care, enjoy entertainment, and save a little. Not survival, comfort, security, freedom. The financial services industry doesn't tell you this because their business model depends on managing as much of your money for as long as possible. If they told you that $300,000 deployed correctly could fund indefinite freedom, day A, you might stop working at 40 instead of 65. That's 25% fewer years of fees they can extract. So instead, they sell you fear. They show you inflation calculators that assume you'll spend the same amount for 40 years. They show you healthcare cost projections that assume you'll use the expensive American system. They show you longevity tables that suggest you might live to 95 and need 50 years of funding, all of it designed to keep you saving and working and paying fees for decades. Here's what they don't show you. Take $300,000 invested in a globally diversified portfolio of dividend stocks and low-cost index FU. NDS. Target a 4% yield through a combination of dividends and safe withdrawal. That generates $12,000 per year, $1,000 per month. Now, move to a location where $1,000 per month covers a comfortable life. Not glamorous, not luxury, comfortable. A one-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood, good food cooked at home with occasional meals out. Local health care through the national system or affordable private insurance. Internet and phone. Modest entertainment and hobbies. Occasional travel within the region. This describes life in Portugal, Spain, Greece, Mexico, Colombia, Ecuador, Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, Albania, Bulgaria, and at least 30 other countries. In many of these places, $1,000 per month isn't scraping by, it's living well by local standards. Better weather than most American cities, better food culture, better work-life balance in the local culture. More walkable cities, better public transportation, stronger social connections. The quality of life isn't worse than the American middle class, it's often better. The only thing you're giving up is proximity to family and friends, which matters enormously to some people and barely at all to others. If you're someone for whom geographic flexibility is possible, $300,000 is genuinely enough to never work again. Not in theory, in practice. This isn't a hypothetical. Tens of thousands of people are living this way right now. The geographic arbitrage retirement community is large and growing. People who realize that the retirement calculator telling them they needed $2 million was based on maintaining an expensive lifestyle in an expensive location, and that completely different mathematics applied if they were willing to be flexible about location. Now, let me address the obvious objections because I've heard them all. First objection, what about health care? American health care is ruinously expensive without EMPL, or coverage. But American health care is not the only option. Most developed countries have public health care systems that are free or low cost for residents. Portugal's National Health Service covers residents, including foreign retirees, for less than $50 per month. Spain's is similar. Many countries offer private health insurance for foreign residents at prices between $100 and $300 per month. For comprehensive coverage, Thailand's private hospitals offer world-class care at prices that are 10 to 20% of American costs. Medical tourism is a massive industry precisely because healthcare in most of the world costs a fraction of American prices. A knee replacement that costs $40,000 in the United States costs $8,000 in Spain and $4,000 in Thailand. Same outcomes, qualified surgeons, modern facilities. The healthcare argument against geographic arbitrage retirement is based on the assumption that American healthcare is superior, which is true for cutting-edge experimental treatments and false for routine care. For routine care, dozens of countries offer equal or better outcomes at vastly lower costs. Second objection, what about inflation? Valid concern. A 4% withdrawal rate assumes your principal maintains its purchasing power. If you're withdrawing $12,000 per year and inflation runs at 3%, your real withdrawal capacity declines over time. 3 solutions to this. First, your $300,000 remains invested in stocks which historically appreciate ahead of inflation. If the market returns 7% and you withdraw 4%, your principal grows at 3%, roughly matching inflation. Your $12,000 annual withdrawal maintains purchasing power. Second, most people in geographic arbitrage retirement find ways to generate modest additional income. Teaching English online, freelance consulting, small online businesses, creating content. When you're living on $12,000 per year, an extra $3,000 or $4,000 from OC. Occasional work makes a huge difference and is easy to achieve without anything resembling a traditional job. Third, lifestyle flexibility. If inflation erodes your purchasing power by 15 or 20% over a decade, you adjust. You move to a slightly cheaper neighborhood. You cook more meals at home. You travel less. The buffer between $12,000 annual spending and survival is enormous in low-cost countries. Small adjustments maintain quality of life even if purchasing power declines. Third objection. What about family and friends? Legitimate concern. Geographic arbitrage retirement means distance from your existing social network unless they come with you. For some people, this is impossible. Aging parents, young children, deep roots in a community. If you're genuinely tied to a location by unmovable obligations, then $300,000 probably isn't enough, unless you're in a low-cost American location. But many people overestimate how tied they are. Adult children don't need you living nearby. Video calls and annual visits maintain relationships. Aging parents are a real constraint, but a temporary one. And there are ways to structure care from a distance if necessary. Friends drift apart over time regardless of location. The friends you had in your 20s aren't the friends you have in your 42nds. New friendships form wherever you live. The geographic arbitrage retirement community is full of people who worried about isolation and found that they built new social networks quickly in their new locations, often stronger networks than what they left behind because the shared experience of choosing an unconventional path creates bonds. I'm not dismissing the cost of distance from family. I'm saying it's a cost worth calculating honestly, rather than assuming it's prohibitive. For some people, it is prohibitive. For others, it's a trade they're willing to make in exchange for decades of freedom. Fourth objection. What if something goes wrong? What if you need more money? What if there's an emergency? 2 answers. First, you still have $300,000. It's invested, not spent. If a true emergency arises, you can access that capital. You're not locked into the 4% withdrawal rate. It's a guideline for sustainable, indefinite withdrawals, not a legal restriction. If you need to withdraw 8% 1 year for an emergency, you do it. Your runway gets shorter, but you handle the emergency. Second, the optionality works both ways. If you leave employment with $300,000 at 40, spend 10 years living on $12,000 per year in geographic arbitrage retirement, and then decide you want to return to traditional employment, you can. You're 50 with $300,000 still in the bank, possibly more if markets were good, and 10 years of life experience most people never get. You're not trapped. You're taking a decade-long sabbatical funded by your capital with the option to return to earning if circumstances or preferences change. Let me make this concrete with real numbers in real places, because abstract calculations don't convince anyone. Scenario 1, Lisbon, Portugal. You can rent a 1-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood for 600 to 800 euros per month, approximately 650 euros to $850. Utilities, including internet, run about $100 per month. Food for one person, cooking most meals at home with occasional dining out, runs $300 to $400 monthly. Healthcare through the Portuguese national system is about $40 monthly. Transportation using public transit and occasional taxis is $50 monthly. Phone service is $20. Entertainment, hobbies, miscellaneous expenses, maybe $100 to $150 monthly. Total monthly expenses, approximately $1,200 to $1,400, or $14,000 to $17,000 annually. You're living in a beautiful European city with incredible food culture, perfect weather, safe streets, walkable neighborhoods, and access to all of Europe via cheap flights. Your quality of life is high by any reasonable standard. $300,000 generating $12,000 annually gets you most of the way there, with a small gap you close through minimal freelance work or by living slightly more frugally. Scenario 2, Chiang Mai, Thailand. One-bedroom apartment in a nice area with pool and gym. $300 to $200 monthly. Utilities, including fast internet, $50. Food, including regular dining out at local restaurants, $300. Private health insurance, $100. Scooter rental for transportation, $50. Phone, $10. Entertainment and miscellaneous, $100. Total approximately $900 to $1,000 monthly, $11,000 to $12,000 annually. You're living in a modern city with incredible food, warm weather year-round, world-class health care at affordable prices, strong expat community, and Southeast Asia available for weekend trips. $300,000 generating $12,000 annually covers this completely with surplus. Scenario 3, Colombia. One-bedroom apartment in Poblado or Lorella's neighborhoods, $400 to $600 monthly. Utilities, $70. Food, $250. Health insurance, $120. Transportation using metro and taxis, $60. Phone, $15. Entertainment, $100. Total approximately $1,000 to $1,200 monthly, $12,000 to $14,000. You're living in the city of eternal spring with perfect weather every day, incredible coffee culture, affordable health care, growing expat community, and improving safety. $300,000 covers this with minimal buffer. Now compare those three scenarios to the cost of maintaining basic middle-class life in American cities. Studio or one-bedroom apartment in a Tier 2 American city like Austin or Denver, $1,500 to $2,000 monthly minimum. Utilities, $150. Food, $500 if you cook most meals. Health insurance, $400 to $700 depending on age and plan. Car payment or transportation, $300 to $500. Phone, $60. Entertainment, $150. Total, $3,000 to $4,000 monthly. Minimum, $36,000 to $48,000 annually. To generate $36,000 annually at 4% withdrawal rate, you need $900,000. To generate $48,000, you need $1.2 million. That's 3 to 4 times the capital requirement of Geographic Arbitrage retirement for a comparable or worse quality of life. This is why the standard retirement advice is so far off. It's calculating for the most expensive possible scenario and calling that the minimum requirement. Now, let's talk about how you actually accumulate $300,000 because the timeline matters. If you're 25 and save aggressively, $300,000 is achievable by 35 or 40. If you're 45, it's achievable by 50 or 55. If you're already 60, the timeline is different, but the target is still more achievable than $2 million. Here's the math. Assume you can save $2,000 per month, $24,000 per year. That's aggressive but possible for someone earning $75,000 to $100,000 annually who lives frugally and prioritizes freedom over consumption. Invest that $24,000 annually in low-cost stock index funds averaging 8% returns. After 10 years, you have $360,000. After 15 years, you have $670,000. The compound interest does most of the work if you give it time, and don't interrupt it with withdrawals or panic selling during downturns. Now, if $2,000 monthly is impossible, adjust the timeline. Save $1,000 monthly, $12,000 annually. After 15 years at 8% returns, you have $270,000. Not quite $300,000, but close enough that a few years of modest additional work or a slightly lower cost location makes it work. After 20 years, you have $460,000, well past the threshold. The point is that $300,000 is achievable within a reasonable working timeline for people with middle-class incomes who are willing to save aggressively and live below their means during their accumulation years. It's not easy. It requires discipline and sacrifice and resisting the lifestyle inflation that consumes most people's income increases. B is possible in a way that 2 or 3 million is not possible for most people. Here's what the accumulation phase looks like in practice. You live in a low-cost area or with roommates to minimize housing cost. You drive a used car that you maintain yourself. You cook most meals at home. You work side hustles to increase income. You avoid consumer debt completely. You invest every raise and bonus instead of upgrading lifestyle. You track spending obsessively to identify waste. You optimize taxes through retirement accounts. You avoid expensive hobbies and status signaling consumption. This sounds miserable to people who are optimizing for present consumption. It's liberating to people who are optimizing for future freedom. The difference is time preference. If you value today's comfort more than tomorrow's freedom, you'll spend your raises on a nicer apartment, a nicer car, and nicer vacations. If you value tomorrow's freedom more than today's comfort, you'll bank those raises and let them compound. Neither choice is wrong. They're different values producing different outcomes. What I'm telling you is that the second path leads to optional employment within 10 to 20 years, depending on starting point and saving rate. The first path leads to mandatory employment until your 60s or 70s. Most people claim they choose freedom, but their spending reveals they choose comfort. The few who genuinely choose freedom and align their behavior with that choice discover that $300,000 in geographic arbitrage make freedom achievable far sooner than they'd been told. Let me address one more objection because it's the most psychologically difficult one for most people. The objection is this: I don't want to leave America. I don't want to live in a foreign country, learning a foreign language, eating foreign food, surrounded by foreign culture. I want the life I have just without having to work for it. This is the objection that reveals whether geographic arbitrage retirement is viable for you. If you're someone who derives identity and comfort from American culture and American lifestyle and American proximity to family and American convenience and American everything, then no, $300,000 is probably not enough. You need more capital to fund a more expensive lifestyle. But I'd encourage you to examine whether that preference is deep and authentic or shallow and circumstantial. Many people think they couldn't possibly be happy living abroad and then spend 2 weeks in Portugal or Mexico or Thailand and realize that not only could they be happy, they might be happier. Better weather improves mood, better food culture improves health. More walkable cities improve fitness. Slower pace improves stress. Stronger social culture improves relationships. Lower cost improves security. Many of the things that make life good are more available in lower cost countries than in American cities optimized for work and consumption. The preference for American life is often a preference for familiarity rather than a preference for superior quality. When people actually experience the alternative, a significant percentage prefer it. Not everyone. Some people genuinely are happiest in American culture and American systems, and for them, geographic arbitrage doesn't work. But many people assume they're in that category without ever testing it. I'm suggesting you test it before assuming your only path to retirement is accumulating $2 million. Here's an experiment. Take a month. Go spend 4 weeks in Lisbon or Shanghai or Medi. Rent an apartment on Airbnb. Cook your meals. Walk the neighborhoods. Use public transportation. Join a gym. Go to coffee shops. Live like a resident, not a tourist. Track your spending carefully. At the end of the month, you'll have data instead of a sump. Scions. You'll know what it actually costs to live there. You'll know whether you could be happy there. You'll know whether the trade-offs are acceptable for probably $2,000 total. You can test whether geographic arbitrage retirement is viable for you personally. That's the cheapest and most valuable financial planning you can do. Because if the answer is yes, you just shortened your working timeline by 10 or 20 years. If the answer is no, you learn something valuable about yourself and can adjust your plans accordingly. Most people never do this experiment. They assume they know the answer without testing it. Then they spend 30 years working toward a retirement target based on assumptions they never validated. That's insane. Go test the assumption. Spend a month in Portugal. If you hate it, you lost a month and $2,000. If you love it, you potentially gain decades of freedom. The asymmetry of that bet is enormous. Now, let me talk about what life actually looks like in geographic arbitrage retirement because the details matter. You wake up without an alarm. The first hour of your day is yours. Coffee, reading, writing, exercise, whatever matters to you. No commute, no meetings, no emails you have to respond to. You decide what to do with the day based on interest and energy rather than obligation. Maybe you work on a small project that generates modest income. Maybe you learn a language. Maybe you write or paint or build something. Maybe you exercise and read and cook an elaborate meal. Maybe you meet friends for coffee and spend 3 hours talking. Maybe you walk around your city with no destination or purpose. The structure is whatever you create. Some people find this terrifying. Without external structure and obligation, they don't know what to do with themselves. These people are not good candidates for early retirement. They need employment to organize their time. And provide purpose. Other people find unlimited time to be the greatest luxury imaginable. They have more interest than time to pursue them. They've spent decades frustrated by having to sell 40 to 60 hours per week to employment. These people thrive in geographic arbitrage retirement. You need to know which type you are before you pursue this path. The way to know is to pay attention to your weekends and vacations. If you're bored and aimless without work structure, you need work, or you need to develop capacity for self-direction before retiring. If you're energized and engaged when you have free time and frustrated when you have to return to work, you'll thrive in retirement. This isn't about age or money, it's about psychology. The second thing that happens in geographic arbitrage retirement is that your relationship with money changes completely. When you're working, money is primarily about earning. How much you make, whether you got a raise, how your income compares to peers. Every financial decision is filtered through income. When you're in geographic arbitrage retirement, living on passive income from invested capital, money becomes entirely about spending and preservation. You're not trying to maximize income. You're trying to optimize spending to maximize quality of life within your fixed budget. This creates completely different psychology. You become hyper-aware of the value of purchases. A $100 dinner isn't just $100, it's 1/10 of your monthly food budget. Is this particular meal worth that trade-off? Sometimes yes, often no. This doesn't make you cheap, it makes you intentional. You spend freely on things that genuinely improve your life and cut ruthlessly on things that don't. Over time, you develop precise knowledge of what actually makes you happy versus what you spent money on out of habit or social pressure. Most people never develop this knowledge because they're always in earning mode, always able to spend more by working more. When income is capped and fixed, you're forced to optimize spending. This turns out to be one of the great benefits of geographic arbitrage retirement. Not just the financial sustainability, but the clarity about values that comes from having to make real trade-offs. The third thing that happens is your time horizon extends. When you're working and looking at 3 or 4 decades before traditional retirement, your planning horizon is short. What happens this year, this quarter, this month? When you leave employment at 40 with enough capital to sustain indefinitely, you're suddenly thinking in 40 or 50-year time horizons. What do you want your life to look like at 60, 70, 80? What matters over decades rather than years? This long time horizon changes everything. Relationships matter more, health matters more, learning matters more, status and consumption matter less. You realize that the next 40 years will be shaped by the habits and relationships and skills you develop. Now, most people never think this way because they're trapped in short-term employment cycles, annual reviews, quarterly targets, monthly bills. Geographic arbitrage retirement forces long-term thinking because you're living a long-term strategy. This is psychologically uncomfortable at first and eventually becomes the greatest gift of the lifestyle. Let me be clear about what I'm not saying. I'm not saying everyone should pursue geographic arbitrage retirement. I'm not saying $300,000 is enough for everyone in every circumstance. I'm not saying living abroad is superior to living in America. What I'm saying is that for a specific type of person, someone with flexibility around location, moderate spending needs, capacity for self-direction, and willingness to embrace a different lifestyle, $300,000 is genuinely in. To make employment optional indefinitely. This describes perhaps 20 to 30% of the population, not everyone, a meaningful minority. If you're in that minority, the standard retirement advice telling you that you need 2 or 3 million is catastrophically wrong. It will keep you working for decades longer than necessary because it's based on assumptions that don't apply to you. The retirement planning industry uses the most expensive scenario as the baseline and calls everyone else's situation a special case. I'm telling you the opposite. Geographic arbitrage retirement should be the baseline calculation, and expensive domestic retirement should be the special case requiring justification. If you choose to stay in America and work until you have 2 million, great, but make it a choice based on genuine preference rather than assumption based on conventional wisdom. Calculate what freedom would actually cost for you personally, given your willingness to be flexible on location. Then decide whether additional years of employment are worth the additional comfort of staying domestic. For some people they are, for others they're not, but most people never run the calculation. They just assume they need 2 million because that's what the calculators say. Here's the final piece. $300,000 at 4% withdrawal generates $12,000 annually. That's baseline minimum, assuming zero additional income. But almost no one in geographic arbitrage retirement generates zero additional income. The internet has made location-independent income trivially easy for anyone with marketable skills. Teaching English online pays $15 to $25 per hour. Freelance writing pays $50 to $100 per hour if you're decent. Consulting in whatever you did professionally pays $100 to $300 per hour. Creating online courses generates passive income. Building small software products generates passive income. None of this require traditional employment. All that can be done on your schedule from anywhere with internet. If you generate an additional $3 to $6,000 annually from occasional freelance work, your total annual funding goes from $12,000 to $15,000 or $18,000. That extra cushion means you're not cutting it close. You have buffer for inflation, for occasional larger expenses, for travel, for whatever. Most people in geographic arbitrage retirement find that they naturally generate some income from projects they find interesting, not because they have to, because when you're not burned out from employment, you have energy for creative and productive activity. That activity often generates income. The result is that 300,000 plus modest income from interesting projects produces a more comfortable and sustainable lifestyle than 12,000 from capital alone. The industry retirement calculators assume zero income after retirement, which is realistic for someone at 70, but unrealistic for someone at 40 or 50. People at 40 or 50 who are freed from mandatory employment usually find ways to generate income from activities they actually want to do. This income doesn't feel like work because it's optional and interesting, but it's real income that makes the 300,000 baseline more than sufficient. So here's what I'm actually saying. $300,000 is enough to make employment optional if you're willing to live in a lower cost location, spend modestly, stay flexible, and remain open to generating some income from projects you find interesting. That's a specific set of conditions. Many people won't meet them or won't want to. But for the people who do meet them, 300,000 is genuinely enough. Not theory, reality. Thousands of people are living this way right now. The Geographic Arbitrage retirement community exists and is growing. They're not suffering. They're not scraping by. They're living comfortable, interesting, meaningful lives with optional employment and abundant time. They're pursuing hobbies and relationships and learning and travel. They're healthier than their peers who are still grinding in corporate jobs. They're happier. They're proof that the conventional retirement timeline is optional, that you don't need 2 million, that freedom is available much sooner than you've been told. The question is whether you're willing to examine your assumptions, test your preferences, optimize your spending, and make unconventional choices. If you are, $300,000 in 2026 gives you a clear target and a short timeline. Start calculating, start saving, start testing locations, start building location, independent income skills. Freedom is closer than you think. The only question is whether you want it badly enough to pursue.